Good evening and welcome to Metro Focus. I'm Jack Ford. Impeachment. Headlines around the world have resonated with the word since news broke that President Donald Trump allegedly sought aid from the Ukraine's president in a quid pro quo transaction asking for dirt against political opponent Joe Biden in return for military aid. One former government official is claiming that this call bolsters Russian President Vladimir Putin's anti-democratic narrative. Russia has previously furthered this agenda by spreading misinformation and disinformation during the 2016 presidential election. Former Undersecretary of State for the Obama administration and former editor-in-chief at Time and well-regarded author Richard Stengel joins us to talk about this and more from his new book titled Information Wars: How We Lost the Global Battle Against Disinformation and What We Can Do About It. His book lays out exactly how Russia interfered in the 2016 election and how we can educate ourselves by separating fact from fiction going into the 2020 election. And we're delighted to have him here with us now. Rick, it's so nice to see you, as always.
Great to see you,
Good
Jack.
to see you. Let me start off with the notion of disinformation. And the simple question is, what is that exactly?
Yes, disinformation is different than misinformation in the following sense. Disinformation is false, untrue information that's used for a strategic purpose to persuade you of something that's not true. Misinformation may be a mistake. And, you know, we in journalism have practiced misinformation for a while because we do make mistakes. And it's also a little different than propaganda, which I say is maybe true or false, also trying to persuade you of a point of view, usually about a nation or a country.
I was struck by a quote that you had said before. And you said you'd long thought that we didn't have a fake news problem. We have a media literacy problem. What do you mean by that?
One of the things I found when I was at the State Department and I saw all of this disinformation that the Russians were doing, and I also was countering ISIS disinformation, I was struck by, even after spending my whole career as a journalist, that people couldn't tell the difference between fact and fiction. They didn't look at the provenance, the origin of where that information came from. And it made me realize that, you know, we'd done a bad job as journalists explaining what we do. The schools didn't do a great job in terms of teaching people how to suss out what's factual and what's not. And I actually think it needs to be something that is taught in school, media literacy.
In what fashion? How do you think that should be done?
I think you teach people, like, what's a trusted source, what's not a trusted source, how do you figure that out? You know, reading something on the internet, as kids will say, is different than reading something on the New York Times on the internet or the Washington Post. I think I've been surprised that people are not as well versed in this as I imagine they to be. And by the way, in academic scholarship, I mean, people you use footnotes, you use primary sources. We need to do the same thing for journalism.
What about the delivery platforms nowadays for news and for journalism? You know, the idea of you're getting your news in a burst of 240 characters.
I'm not against that. I actually think it's, you know, the benefits of the internet are tremendously outweigh the drawbacks. And Twitter, which you're referring to, is instant, but of course it has links to much longer pieces. There's a virtue, I think, in sometimes trying to condense your ideas into a small number of characters. I'm not against that. I just want to figure out ways that we can use it in a more holistic way to better understand what's going on.
Let me talk about some of the things that you write about here, and you mentioned it before when you were in the State Department. And tell us a little bit more about what you found in terms of Russia, what they were doing here, how they managed to weaponize, you know, for instance, the internet.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, they haven't weaponized the whole internet, but
right.
a sector of it.
But enough of it, I guess.
So one of the things I saw, so when I came into office, a few weeks later, Putin annexed Crimea in one of the largest illegal land grabs since World War II. But what I also noticed when I started tweeting about it was I started getting hit by responses from folks with Russian-sounding names saying I was a hypocrite and a propagandist and a liar. And I started looking at that, and then we started looking at it about what the Russians were doing in the Russian periphery, in the Baltics, and Poland, and Germany. And there was this whole rise of disinformation, and that was the time that the Internet Research Agency was started in St. Petersburg, Russia, by a crony of Putin's, which is a troll factory. Hundreds of young people would come in a day creating all of these false narratives, creating different personas on Facebook, on Twitter, or whatever. And we saw the kind of birth of this Russian disinformation effort, which carried over into the 2016 campaign. I say it's a kind of template for them. They saw how successful it was in Russian and Ukraine, and then they transferred it to English, and they haven't stopped.
Are we able, looking back at it, to calculate just what the impact was of the Russians' interference in the 2016 election?
You know, that is the question, and there are certain people who think they know the answer, and I've looked at this now for a long time. I don't know the answer. Where I think they got the most purchase, and we saw some of this in that Senate Intelligence Report, some of it from the Mueller report, is trying to persuade people not to vote in voter suppression. They did a tremendous amount of false content targeted at African American users. A site called Blacktivist, which was a made-up site by the Internet Research Agency, and they were trying to persuade people, black people, not to vote. They also did support for Jill Stein. So, for example, in the 3 states that Trump beat Hillary Clinton in, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, his margin of victory was smaller than the number of votes that Jill Stein got. And obviously, turnout of African-American voters in those 3 places was not nearly as high as it had been in 2012.
You mentioned ISIS, and that might surprise people. You know, we've heard a lot about Russian disinformation. What did you discover about ISIS?
So one of the things that reported to me at the State Department was the one entity that did counter ISIS messaging. It was actually started by Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. And there it was interesting. I mean, and in some ways, it's a model for what might be going on now. They didn't camouflage their identities. They were in favor of the caliphate. There's nothing wrong with the caliphate as an idea. But they also used those platforms to recruit people. What I worry a little bit about in 2020 is these Russian trolls are recruiting Americans who don't know they're dealing with Russian trolls to do things that would hurt our election.
It sounds, even though it certainly sounds insidious, but it also sounds fairly ingenious. I mean, I am not somebody who is terribly well-versed in that world. I can exist, but is that an overstatement?
I think it is an overstatement, and here's why. Because the people they're targeting don't have media literacy. It's like
back to the question that
yes.
I led off with you about
Yeah.
the notion of media literacy.
So it's like, the emails you get from the Nigerian prince who's stuck in Lagos and needs $20,000. Well, and they're often filled with grammatical mistakes and spelling errors. That's deliberate. It's deliberate because they know that if you answer something that has that many mistakes in it, you're a live wire.
That's fascinating.
And what the Russians did was similar. They had poor grammar, their English was terrible, but when they said Hillary Clinton was starting a child sex trafficking ring or the Pope endorsed Donald Trump, people who were liable to believe that would believe it, even though it was as messed up as those emails from the Nigerian prince.
That's completely fascinating because I thought, okay, well, this is the way we get rid of these guys. But as you said, if somebody clicks on it, they're thinking, we're reeling them in now.
Yeah, they're not sophisticated. I mean, even in the book, I give some examples of people Russians who tweeted at me and, all the words we can't say on television, they couldn't even spell.
Looking forward, Facebook just came out and there was an instance where there was something that was clearly false that they got out on their platform. Mm-hmm. And their response was, that's not our job, essentially, to be the fact checkers of what's going on here. And the response was essentially couched, understandably, in free speech language, saying, look, we put things out there and people can take a look at it, they can absorb it, they can reject it, they can do whatever we want, but we're not going to be the fact-checking gatekeepers. Where does that take us?
Well, as a legal maven, you know that the First Amendment applies to government. It doesn't apply to private companies. Right. Those platform companies have their own constitutions that call the Terms of Service Agreement. They can take any kind of things off that they want. But one of the recommendations, as I make in the book, is the Communications Decency Act of 1996, Section 230, really helped create these great platform companies. And one way they did that is they gave them immunity from liability for the content they publish, because they weren't traditional publishers in the sense that
They were creating it, they're just putting it out there.
they're putting it out there, third-party content. But you know what? The law needs to be changed. They need to have more liability for that content. Not the same liability that Time Magazine has for every word that is edited and curated, but they can't have hate speech. They can't have verifiably, demonstrably false content. That has to come off. So the reason they protected it is because it was an ad, and they say it was political speech. And I agree, political speech is actually of a higher order in a way than ordinary speech. But you cannot protect demonstrably false content. That to me is one of the things where the law needs to be changed.
Last question for you. We hear people talk about things described as echo chambers. We go to hear what we want to hear. Does that suggest to you then that we are very far away from literacy, from media literacy? Indeed, we're kind of rocketing away from it, and that maybe we shouldn't be optimistic moving on in the future?
What you're really talking about is human nature, right? And, smart cognitive scientists who've created these ideas of cognitive bias have talked about confirmation bias, which is that we're more receptive to information we agree with, and we're less receptive to information that we don't, and we seek out what we agree with, right? So, that's human nature. And in fact, one of the difficulties of getting this kind of awful, false disinformation off of the web is that, there's another cognitive bias, the backfire effect, which is that people who have strongly held beliefs, if you try to disabuse them of that belief, they hold the belief even more strongly. So how do you disabuse them of it? So I actually think, though, part of the remedy is to give the content companies more liability. They have to take off dangerous speech, hate speech, demonstrably false speech, and then that will improve things. But basically, we're talking about human nature here, and we're not going to change that right away.
Well, as I said in the beginning, information wars, how we lost the global battle against disinformation and what we can do about it. It reads like a novel. It really does.
Thank you. It's a story.
It is a story.
Yeah.
And you're a great storyteller. Rick, it's good seeing you, and it's a marvelous book. Come back and visit us again.
Thank you so much, Jack. I'd love to.
You be well.